Greetings! Heidi-ho, all you groovy guys and groovy gals. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me. We left off. Remember, we're talking about our years in Egypt. You know, there's a huge gap between the death of, really, Jacob, because they covered Joseph's death just like 2 verses later in Genesis, in Genesis. And then they go on and start Exodus. Well, by the time we start Exodus, so much has happened that's not in the Torah. And today, last week, and today, and probably next week, we're going to see more of what happened in our lives, Israel's lives, in Jacob's sons' lives, and Jacob's seed's life. I got several things I want to talk with you today about. But I wonder if there's a difference between Jacob's seed and Israel's seed. I think there is. Now, unfortunately, it seems to me that Yasher is not quite as crisp as talking about this, but maybe it's more crisp. Maybe it's the Torah that always talks about Israel's seed, when really we should be talking about Jacob's seed. I wonder. I'm talking about men of the flesh versus men of the spirit. Something that we really need to think about. Let's do a quick review. Remember, the topic last week had to do with a new king arose in Egypt. He arose when Joseph and all of his brethren were dead. But Joseph was the first one. We saw that lots of them died afterwards, and the last one seemed to be Levi. But you know what? It wasn't Levi. No, it was Levi. I was thinking Ephraim is still there. But Ephraim was a son of Joseph, a son's son. So we're talking about Jacob's sons right now, aren't we? So Levi died in our 93rd year in Egypt. And that's when the heat began to be raised on Jacob's seed. It said, and it came to pass after the death of Levi, when all Egypt saw that Jacob's seed, the brethren of Joseph, were dead, all the Egyptians began to afflict Jacob's seed and to embitter their lives. Well, now in the 102nd, that was when? 93rd year. 9 years later, a new king arises. This king never knew Levi. He is going to be 20 years old when he begins to reign. That means that when Levi died, he was 11 years old. He never knew Levi, never knew any of those guys. New king is arising. They got a problem. Well, here. And this was also from Yehovah, talking about the persecution that was arising on Egypt. This king, his name is called Melal, is the 4th king that we have lived under in Egypt. And he's going to be the king that we live under the most time. He's going to reign for 90, what did it say? It seemed like it was 96 years, 94 years. There it is right there in verse 9. Melal was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 94 years. There's only going to be like 5 years left, 4 years left before we leave Egypt. And this is not the king that Moses is going to deal with. Wait till you see the king that Moses is going to deal with. Well, they're concerned. No. We switched stories here. Now we're going to Zepho. Ben Eliphaz, Ben Esau heard the report, and he went to meet. This is Angias, the king of Nineveh, which is Africa, is coming to attack the sons of Ketim's seed. With Zepho, Ben Eliphaz, Ben Esau, Ben Jacob, who's the king of that city. Zepho is coming with a huge army, and he's afraid, but he defeats him. Uses Yahovah to do it. He prays to Yahovah. Remember that last week? Zepho sought Yahovah. And he said, "Oh, Elohim of Abraham and Isaac." So he did all that. And what happened? He forgot Yahovah. Yahovah delivered him. He didn't lose a single man. Wiped out the king of Africa. Chased him away. What happened to him? He got a big head. Remember, after he chased Angias away, Balaam, we're starting to get to know Balaam, he went to Zepho. He went to the sons of Ketim, the Ketim seed. He goes wherever the wind blows best. And Balaam, the son of Beor, was at that time with Angias in the battle. When he saw that Zepho prevailed over Angias, he fled from there and came to Ketim. Yes, now he's going to be with Ketim. At that time, Zepho had returned from war. And when Zepho had seen how he prevailed over the people of Africa, and had smitten them in battle with the edge of the sword, Zepho advised this Ketim seed to go to Egypt and to fight with Jacob's seed and with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Hear that? He doesn't understand that it was not him who prevailed. It was Yahovah working through him that helped him to prevail. But now he's got a big head and he's going to go to Egypt. Well, he's got even bigger plans because he's going to get right here, look, the king of Edom, the east seed, Ishmael's seed. And Zepho, king of Ketim, went forth in an array of hosts. Look at the amount of people that they have. It's 3 days' journey. When they stretched out to go from Hebron to Egypt, they had a length on their caravan that was a 3 days journey from one end to the other end. Huge. A people numerous as the sand of the sea, probably over 1 million people. And what's going to happen? Egypt is going to rally about 300,000 men. But look at this, verse 22. And the men of Israel's men, and Egypt went forth about 300,000 men and 150 men from Israel. You know what? I wondered about this last week. How come it was only 150 men of Israel that went? Was it because perhaps everybody else in Egypt was not Israel's seed? They were Jacob's seed. Men who were not spiritually born. Just a thought. You know, there's a reason when I read this. I know I sound anal sometimes. Talking about B'nai Israel, it says the children of Esau, the children of Israel. I think sometimes you get mad at me because I turn these words around to give us what I believe is better understanding. I want you to understand that we're talking about seed of men. But when we talk about seed of Israel, We're talking about a whole nother group. Completely different men, spiritually born men, unlike any of the other men. You know what? When Jehovah spoke to us, Israel's seed, in the wilderness through Moses, we had men with us who were now Israel's seed, who were previously Egyptians, perhaps Midianites, and other areas throughout the world who had joined themselves to us. When we ate that Passover meal, we became spiritually born men, Israel's seed. Is that the men here who are fighting? Look what it says. I think I've got it here. I think I highlighted it too. Egypt's going to go out. They don't even want us to fight with them. They're afraid, really. They're afraid. 150 men, 300,000 men on their side, 150 on our side. They're afraid that we're going to turn against them, against the million men that they're coming against. Wow. Wow. So, they get whomped. The Egyptians, it says, and all the Egyptians fought with these kings opposite Pathros and Tachpanakes. And the battle was severe against the Egyptians. So the Egyptians come running back to us. And all the Egyptians cried unto Israel's seed, saying, hasten to us, assist us, save us from the hands of Esau, Ishmael, and Keturah's seed. They had all of Keturah's seed. The seed of the east, it's called. So here, 150 men of Israel's seed ran from their station to the camps of the kings. And Israel's seed cried unto Jehovah, their Elohim, to deliver them. It says they smote 4,000 men, chased them all the way back to Cush. Where's Cush? Tom found this map for me. I thought Cush was down in this area. But I just was not comfortable with this particular area being Cush. I think it is. I think it might be. But you know what? I was really interested to see that Cush was up here in, I guess, what it would be modern day Iran. Here's Midian, the Midianites. This would be modern day Saudi Arabia. And here's Cush. Is it possible that they chased him that far? We're going to see that Cush is going to play a very important role with Moses and with Balaam. Not this week, but next week we will. Very interesting stuff. Moses is going to become the king of Cush for 40 years. Cush. He's the firstborn son of Ham. This is all here, sons of Ham. This is Canaan, Mitzrayim, Put, and then Cush, his 4 sons. Pretty interesting. They chased him that far. So now, they on their way back, they found some of the Egyptians who ran away from the battle, and they killed the Egyptians. We killed the Egyptians for deserting us. Smite the Ishmaelite. Smite the Edomite. And Keturah's seed. That's what we said as we were killing the men of Egypt. Well, what did that do? It put fear into Egypt. Oh no! This people is greater and mightier than we are. Remember what we said last week? That's what it said in Torah. And he said to the people, this is the king saying to the people, look, the people of Israel's seed are more and mightier than we. Why? We don't know. Well, now we know. Because when Egypt tried to defeat this million men with 300,000, they couldn't do it. But we, Israel's seed, with 10,000 to 1 odds, cleaned their clock and drove them back to Cush. Oh, they're afraid of us. And rightfully so. We serve a great Elohim. Thou hast seen their strong power, for this power is unto them from their fathers. But a few men stood up against people numerous as the sands. What are we going to do with these men? If war should happen, they're going to overtake us. They're going to fight against our enemies. Yeah, they realize they can't fight us. Well, Pharaoh had an idea. It says, we're going to act cunningly towards them. We're going to tell them that we need to build defenses. Remember, Pithom and Ramses. We're going to build battle defenses, fortify the cities. That was the pretext for putting us, Israel's seed, to work. We're going to do it with the Egyptians. And then they said after a month, the Egyptians are going to start to back out and leave only Israel to work. They said they'd pay us daily. Seemed like a good deal. Until we realized they're making us their slaves. But look what it says. After they shall have built with you for their daily hire, drag yourselves away from them daily, one by one in secret. Then you shall rise up and become their taskmasters and officers. Well, they did. But look at this. And when Egypt and all Israel's seed heard all that Pharaoh's servants had spoken, there came from the Egyptians and the Israel's seed to build with the Pharaoh's servants, Pithom and Ramses. But none of Levi's seed came with their brethren to build. Hear that? We're going to see this 3 or 4 times that Levi's seed never worked with the Egyptians. They were wise to what was going on and didn't want any part of it. So they put us to work. Here it says, but Levi's seed were not employed in the work with their brethren, with Israel's brethren, from the beginning unto the day of their going forth from Egypt. We never worked for them. The Levites never worked for them. And Levi's seed knew that the Egyptians had spoken all these words with deceit to the Israelites. Therefore, Levi's seed refrained from approaching to the work with their brethren. And the Egyptians did not direct their attention to make Levi's seed work afterwards, since they had not been with their brethren at the beginning. Therefore, the Egyptians left them alone. Well, the whole idea was to make them so tired that they didn't have time to procreate. Not tonight, honey, I'm too tired. But they found just the opposite. The more they worked, the more they procreated. And they were getting more and more of Israel's seed, Jacob's seed, into the land. Well, this is the 125th year of the Israelites going down to Egypt. Remember, we just were talking about, oh, no, we haven't talked about her yet. So we're going to get to that today, aren't we? 125th year. Lots going on in the 125th year. Here's Samlah. Was it Samlah? No, it was Hadad ben Bedad, king of Edom. He died. Now Samlah from Masrekah, from the country of the east, seed reigned in his place. He had this great idea. We had a covenant with Angeas, and the sons of Kittim beat up Angeas. Let's go get the sons of Kittim. Well, Edom's seed, Esau's seed, is saying, wait a second, that's Zephos' country. He's the king over there. We can't fight against him. So this king backed off. The Egyptians heard about them going against Kittim, and then they got afraid. Made us want to work even harder. You know what? Fear motivates those who live and rule with fear and intimidation. They're just as afraid. They think they're not afraid, or they act like they're not afraid, but they're afraid. They cover their fear. But they live by fear. They thrive on fear. Satan's kingdom. But as the Egyptians increased the labor upon Israel's seed, so did Israel's seed increase and multiply. And all Egypt was filled with Israel's seed. Still the 125th year. What's happening in the 125th year? But they increased and grew in the land of Egypt, and the land of Goshen was filled with Israel's seed. Well, they have this great idea. Here's an officer, a counselor to Pharaoh. His name is Job, from Mesopotamia in the land of Uz. Not the Job from the book of Job. Yehovah was very proud of that man. This can't be him. He's speaking against Israel's seed. His plan? Kill him. Use the, well, here. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go forth. Let it be written in the laws of Egypt, which shall not be revoked, that every male child that is, we're talking about Yeladim. Yelad is young man, young boy, young child, male child. I like that, male child. Yeladim. It says that every male child born to the Israelites, his blood shall be spilled upon the ground. And by your doing this, when all the male children of Israel shall have died, and the evil of their wars will cease, let the king do so and send all the Hebrew midwives. There's the Hebrew midwife. Now he's going to talk to Shiphrah. He's going to talk to Puah. Kill the babies if they're males. They won't do it. They fear Yehovah more than they fear the king. And they were going to be blessed for that. They said, oh, don't you know the babies are so strong? They're coming out before the midwives can even get there. And the mothers are hardy too. Unlike the Egyptian women and the Egyptian sons. It says they're hale. Well, this is where we left off last week. 125th year in Egypt. Our 125th year. We're still going to be in Egypt for 210 years. What is that? Another 85 years. Approximately. Yeah, no, 85 years exactly. It says there was a man in the land of Egypt of Levi's seed, whose name was Amram ben Kohath ben Levi ben Israel. And this man went and took a woman, namely Jochebed. Look what it says. The daughter of Levi. His father's sister. Who's his father? Amram's father. Kohath, the son of Levi. We always hear about 3 sons being born to Levi. Who are they? Merari, Kohath, and here, let's go there. This is Genesis 46. It's the roster that we came out of Egypt. You need to see this. Levi, sons of Levi. Here they are. Kohath, Gershom, and Merari. See any daughters there? No daughters. Jochebed is their sister. The woman that Amram, Kohath's son, is going to marry. He's going to marry his aunt. at 126 years old. And she was 126 years old when he came to her. Now, last week I talked about, let me just mention it real quick. I said she's the daughter of Levi. This is the first time I ever even considered that this woman, Jochebed, Amram's woman, Moses' mother, was the daughter of Levi. Oh my gosh, that's really important. For those of you who think we were in Egypt for 430 years, blows that theory all to pieces. Doesn't work. Because we weren't in Egypt for 430 years. It says we came out on the 430 years to the very day. Well, that doesn't mean from the very day that we went in. No, we're confused. We lack understanding. We think that's what it means, but there's more to be seen. Here, I put this together because I wanted to be able to see who is Jochebed. I put she was Amram's 126-year-old aunt when she married. Yowza! Moses was a miracle child. Moses is going to be born when she's 130 years old. No, he's going to be born when she's 131 years old. And we've been in Egypt for 130 years is a better way to say that. And Levi's seed, here it is, were Gershom, this is Yasher, were Gershom, Kohath, Merari, and their sister Jochebed wasn't one of the seeds, but she's their sister, who was born unto them, and they're going down to Egypt. Here's another one in Torah. Now Amram took for himself, this is Exodus 6:20, Jochebed, his father's sister. There it is, his father's sister, as his woman. It's in there. We just miss it because we don't think through what's going on. His father's sister. Who's his father? Kohath. That means Levi had a daughter. And the years of the life of Amram were 173. Here's another one. And a man of the house. This is Exodus 20. Oh, I thought there was another one. Numbers. Where's the one in Numbers? I guess I don't have it in here. Rats. That was a good one. And a man of the house of Levi went and took a woman, a daughter of Levi. A daughter of Levi. We're talking about an actual daughter of Levi. Wow, amazing. Gosh, I wish I had that other one in there. You know what? I've got it. I want you to see it. I think it's important that you see this. It's in the Torah. We just miss it. Let's go to Exodus 2, verse 1. Oops. A daughter of Levi. Let's see if I've got the one I'm looking for here. Here it is. Exodus. Here it is, Numbers. Yeah, I thought it was Numbers. Numbers 26:59. The name of Amram's woman was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. And to Amram she bore Aaron and Moses and their sister Miriam. Yeah, she's the daughter of Levi. That definite article is there in this verse. Well, very interesting to see how this all fits together. Do the translators not even want this to fit together? Because it doesn't fit their idea that we were in Egypt for 430 years? Do you know how many kings we'd have after 430 years? There would have been a lot of kings. As it was, we were part of the rulership of 5 kings. And this current king, oh, he's a baddie, but he's going to come to a horrid end. Well, let's continue. And the woman conceived and bore a daughter and called her name Miriam, because in those days the Egyptians had embittered the lives of Israel's seed. And she conceived again and bore a son and called his name Aaron. For in those days of her conception, Pharaoh began to spill the blood of the male children. I wonder if this is, It has to be. We were just talking about in the 125th year, he met with the two midwives, trying to get them to spill the blood. That's what they're talking about. Now, something's going to happen. They have this idea that since the midwives aren't working out, that they're going to use the soldiers, Egyptian soldiers, to find these sons and throw them into the river. This is about the time that this is going on. Let me just read this. This is switching gears a little bit again. It says, in those days died Zepho. Remember Zepho? Ben Eliphaz, Ben Esau, king of Kittim, king of Rome. Zepho, a son of Esau, rebellious son of Esau. The opposite of Jacob, the man of the spirit. Esau is a man of the flesh. He's ruling Rome. Now, Janius is going to rule in Rome. The time that Zepho reigned over Kittim's seed was 50 years. And he died and was buried in the city of Nabna, in the land of Kittim. And Janius, one of the mighty men of Kittim's seed, reigned after him, and he reigned 50 years. But look at this. And it was after the death of the king of Kittim, Kittim's king, that Balaam, Ben Beor, fled from the land of Kittim. And he went and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. The man, Balaam, says he was wise and skilled in sorcery. He helped Engeus. Then he went to Kittim and helped Zepho. Now he's going to go to Pharaoh. Ooh, wait till you see what he's going to do. He's going to try to kill Moses. And Pharaoh received him with great honor, for he had heard of his wisdom. And he gave him presents and made him for a counselor and aggrandized him. And Balaam dwelt in Egypt in honor with all the nobles of the king. And the nobles exalted him because they all coveted to learn his wisdom. His wisdom, worldly wisdom. Seems good sometimes. And in the 130th year of Israel's going down to Egypt, here's the 130th year. This is going to be the year that Moses is going to be born. It says Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon his kingly throne and lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales in his hands, in the hands of the old man, such scales as are used by the merchants. Remember how they weigh things out? And the old man, so they can get the correct amount of silver or gold. And the man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh. And the old man took all the elders of Egypt and all the nobles and the great men, and he tied them together and put them on the scale. And he took a milk kid. A milk kid. What is a milk kid? I don't even know. Milk kid. Is it a kid on milk?
Oh, it's a goat. A kid is a...
Well, yeah, I know. Maybe it's a
goat milk.
Goat milk. Goat kid. But it says a milk kid. I don't know. And the kid preponderated overall. It weighed heavier than all the elders, all the great men. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision, why the kid should preponderate over all. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning and called all his servants, and he related to them the dream. And the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to all the wise men, interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it. And Balaam, Ben Beor, answered the king and said, "This means nothing else but a great evil will spring up against Egypt in the latter days." A great Egypt. Get ready, Egypt. It's about to happen again. You know what? We are living in Egypt. We're in Egypt. It's going to happen again. A great evil is going to spring up against Egypt in the latter days. It says, "For a son will be born to Israel." A male child is going to be born to Israel, who will destroy Egypt and its inhabitants and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. I put 2 have been born now, Moses and the 144,000, the servants of Elohim. They're going to do what's going to be done here in the last days. Let me read the bottom one first. It says, "Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says Yehovah, that it should no longer be said, Yehovah lives, who brought up Israel's seed from the land of Egypt. But Yehovah lives, who brought up Israel's seed from the land of the north and from all the lands where he has driven them." Look what it says in the last days here. It says, "Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child." There's the male child. Ooh, did you know that Moses was a premature birth? 7 months he was born. Who has seen such a thing? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her sons. Not son, her sons. Does this relate to what's going on right here? I believe it does. "Now therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of Israel's seed and their expectation before this evil arise against Egypt." Hear that? Balaam is encouraging the king to destroy the seed. And the king said to Balaam, "What shall we do unto Israel? Surely after a certain manner did we at first counsel against them, and could not prevail over them." They've tried a bunch of different things. Not working. "Now therefore give you also advice against them, by which we may prevail over them." And Balaam answered the king, saying, "Send now and call thy counselors, and we will see what their advice is upon this matter, and afterwards thy servant will speak." I think that's a bit of a cop-out. He doesn't want to put himself out there, it sounds to me. He wants to hear what the counselors have to say first. He's going to talk to 2 counselors. Look at who the 2 counselors are. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors. Reuel, the Midianite. Ooh, do you know who Reuel is? Reuel is going to be the father-in-law of Moses. He's going to be Jethro. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel the Midianite. Oh, here, what does my note say? Abraham again took a woman, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Yokchan, Dan, Midian. There's Midian. This man, the Midianite, is from the line of Keturah from the line of Abraham through Keturah. This is the father of Zipporah, Moses' first wife. Oh, well, yeah, Raya just said second wife, and yeah, in a sense, she's right. There's a lady in Cush that supposedly was his wife, but he was never intimate with her. So, yeah, that would be debatable whether they were really man and woman. Okay. The king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel the Midianite and Joab the Uzite. Uzites from Uz. And they came and sat before the king. And the king said to them, Behold, you have heard the dream which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now therefore give counsel, and know and see what is to be done with Israel's seed, whereby we may prevail over them before their evil shall spring up against us. And Raul the Midianite answered the king and said, May the king live! May the king live! Gotta treat a king gently. If it seems good to the king, if it seems good, let him desist from the Hebrews and leave them. Leave him alone. Let him not stretch forth his hand against them. For these are they whom Jehovah chose in the days of old, and took, look what it says, and took as a lot of his inheritance from where? Amongst all the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth. They're not just Jacob's seed. They come from all the nations of the earth. And who is there that stretches his hand against them with impunity, of whom their Elohim was not avenged? Nobody. Surely thou knowest that when Abraham went down to Egypt, Pharaoh, the former king of Egypt, saw Sarah his woman, and took her for his woman, took her for a woman, because Abraham said, She's my sister. For he was afraid lest the men of Egypt should slay him on account of his woman. And when the king of Egypt had taken Sarah, then Elohim smote him and his household with a heavy plague until he restored, she was Sarai then, until he was restored unto Abraham his woman Sarah. Then he was healed. And Avimelech, the Gerarite, King Gerarite, Avimelech the Gerarite, he's from Gerar, king of the Philistines, Elohim punished on account of Sarah, Abraham's woman, by stopping up every womb from man to beast. When there Elohim came to Avimelech in the dream of night and terrified him in order that he might restore to Abraham Sarah whom he had taken. And afterwards all the people of Gerar were punished on account of Sarah. And Abraham prayed to his Elohim for them, and he entreated him and healed him. He knows the history. He's the son of Abraham. He knows what's happened. And Abimelech feared all the evil that came upon him and his people. And he returned to Abraham, his woman, Sarah, and gave him with her many gifts. He did so also to Isaac when he had driven him from Gerar. And Elohim had done wonderful things to him, that all the watercourses of Gerar were dried up, and their productive trees did not bring forth, until Avimelech of Gerar, Akuzath, one of his friends, and Pichol, the captain of the host, went to him, and they bent and bowed down before him to the ground. And they requested him to supplicate for them. And he prayed to Jehovah for them, and Jehovah was entreated of him, and he healed them. Now it says, Jacob, the plain man. Oh, you know what? If you've listened to some of my teaching, you know what's going on here. The plain man. This is the Tom. So often the translators want to call this man the plain man. But what does the name really mean? Tom man, one who is mature and upright, one who is whole. Jacob was an upright and whole man. He was a spiritual man, was delivered through his integrity from the hand of his brother Esau and the hand of Laban, the Syrian, his mother's brother, who had sought his life. Likewise, from the hand of the kings of Canaan, who had come together against him and his sons to destroy them. And Jehovah delivered them out of their hands. And they turned upon them and smote them. For who has ever stretched forth his hands against them with impunity? It's not going to happen. Surely Pharaoh, the former, thy father's father, I actually think it's thy father's father's father, raised Joseph, the son of Jacob, above all the princes of the land of Egypt, when he saw his wisdom, for through his wisdom he rescued all the inhabitants of the land from the famine. And after which he ordered Jacob and his sons to come down to Egypt in order that through their virtue the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen might be delivered from the famine. Now therefore, in light of all that I've said, if it seems good in thine eyes, cease from destroying Israel's seed. But if it be not thy will that they shall dwell in Egypt, send them forth from here. Don't hurt them, that they may go to the land of Canaan, to the land where their ancestors sojourned. And when Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, look at, they were just calling him what? Who were they calling him just a moment ago? Raul. Where is that? Raul the Midianite. Yeah. Now he's calling him Jethro, isn't he? When Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, Raul, Abraham's great grand offspring and Moses' future father-in-law, he was very angry with him. So he rose with shame from the king's presence and went to Midian, his land, and took, look what he took, Joseph's stick with him. Isn't that interesting? You know, when I first read that, I didn't know a thing about Joseph's stick. And I thought, what stick? What's going on here? Joseph's stick? We will see that this stick is the rod of Elohim. This is the rod of Elohim. Oh my goodness, this is an important rod. He had the wisdom to take it with him. And the king said to Job the Uzite, what sayest thou, Job? And what is thy advice respecting the Hebrews? Well, listen to his advice. And Job said to the king, behold, all the inhabitants of the land are in thy power. This is what he's going to start as the foundation for his argument. Behold, the inhabitants of the land are in thy power. Bad foundation. That foundation is going to get you killed if you're going to be a leader of this world, because they aren't in your power. Let the king do as it seems good in his eyes. And the king said unto Balaam, what dost thou say? Balaam, speak thy word that we may hear it. And Balaam said to the king, of all that the king has counseled against the Hebrews, will they be delivered? And the king will not be able to prevail over them with thy counsel. No, he thinks he's going to prevail over them with Balaam's counsel. For if thou thinkest to lessen them by flaming fire, thou cannot prevail over them. For surely their Elohim delivered Abraham, their father, from Ur of the Chaldees. Remember, he was thrown in the fiery furnace. He lived. And if thou thinkest to destroy them with the sword, surely Isaac, their father, was delivered from it. And a ram was placed in his stead. And if hard, rigorous work thou thinkest to lessen them, thou wilt not prevail even for this. For their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of hard work, and prospered. Now therefore, O king, hear my words, for this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which thou wilt prevail over them, and from which thou shouldst not depart. if it please the king, let them order their children, which shall be born from this day forward, to be thrown into the water. They tried the subtle approach with the midwives. Now they're moving on to an overt approach. Kill them outright. This is what the counsel of Balaam is. Let them be thrown in the water. For by this canst thou wipe away their name. For none of them nor their fathers were tried in this manner. He thinks he's going to try something new. It has not, none of the other things have worked. Why does he think this is going to work? And the king heard the words of Balaam, and the thing pleased the king and the princes. Remember, this is Malal, the wicked guy. And the king did according to the word of Balaam. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued and a law to be made throughout the land of Egypt, saying, every Yeled born to the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. And Pharaoh called unto all his servants, saying, go now and seek throughout the land of Goshen, where Israel's seed are, and see that every son born to the Hebrews shall be cast into the river, but every daughter you shall let live. And when Israel's seed heard this thing which Pharaoh had commanded, to cast the Yeledim into the river, some of the people separated from their wives in order to adhere to them. Now, this doesn't make sense to me. I think this had to happen a couple of years earlier. Moses is going to be born in the 130th year, but this says it was the 130th year that they made this decision. It just doesn't flow quite as well as I would like to see. You decide for yourselves. Some of the people separated from their wives, and others adhered to them. And from that day forward, when the time of delivery arrived for those women in Israel who had remained with their husbands, they went and fled to bring forth there. And they brought forth in the field, and left their children, their sons, their Yeled, upon the field, and returned home. And Jehovah had sworn to their ancestors to multiply them, sent one of his ministering angels, which are in heaven, to wash each child in water, and to anoint and swathe it, and put in its hand 2 small stones, from one which he sucked milk, and from the other he sucked honey. And he caused its hair to grow to its knees, by which it might cover itself, to comfort it, and to cleave to it through the compassion for it. And when Elohim had compassion over them, and had desired to multiply them upon the face of the land, he ordered his earth to receive them, to be preserved therein till the time of their growing up, after which the earth opened its mouth and vomited them forth. And they sprouted forth from the city like the herb of the earth and the grass of the forest. And they returned each to his family and his father's house, and they remained with them. My only comment was, okay, I don't know how that works. Can Jehovah do that? I suppose he can do that. But yeah, that's really out there. And Israel's seeds, babies, were upon the earth like the herbs of the field, through Elohim's grace to them. And when all the Egyptians saw this thing, they went forth, each to his field and his yoke of oxen and his plowshares, and they plowed it up as one plows the earth at seed time. And when they plowed, they were unable to hurt the infants of Israel's seed. So the people increased and waxed exceedingly, no matter what they do. And Pharaoh ordered his officers daily to go to Goshen to seek the babies, to seek Israel's seed's babies. And when they sought and found one, they took it from the mother's bosom by force and threw it into the river. But the female child they left with its mother, and thus did the Egyptians to the Israelites all the days. Well, we get to read Exodus 2, 1 through 10. That's what's going to be covered in this next portion. There's so little in Torah that is being covered by all this broad amount of information in Yasher. Let's go to Exodus chapter 2, 1 through 10. And a man of the house of Levi went and took, it says, a daughter of Levi. A daughter of Levi. Really, he took Levi's daughter. I'll bet you that's what it says. He took Levi's daughter. He took, that's Levi. Levi's daughter. Yeah, it says a daughter of Levi. It could literally be Levi's daughter. Interesting. Well, we talked about some of these other things. I'm not going to dwell on that. Let's go back. So the woman conceived and bare a son. Oh, look at that. No, there's the daughter. No, took a woman, the daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 days. We're not even going to talk about Miriam and Aaron, are we? We don't know that Moses is going to be born prematurely at 7 months. We don't know that she's going to hide him for 3 months in the house. Well, we do know that. She hid him for 3 months. But why? What happened after 3 months that all of a sudden she's got to get rid of him? Something urgently happened. And when she could no longer hide him, hear that? She took the ark of bulrushes for him and daubed it with asphalt and pitch. Asphalt and pitch. But the child put the child in it and laid it in the reeds of the river. Laid it in the reeds of the river's bank. Moses was delivered from the water. I like that. Moses is delivered from the waters. When we talk about waters, I always think about the waters of the world. Oftentimes in prophetic speech, when we talk about the rivers, when we talk about the waters, we're talking about the world itself. Right now, Yahovah is delivering men who will become his servants from the waters of this world. And when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds of the river bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. She had a vested interest. She had prophesied his birth some years before. Maybe it was just a year before. Didn't even give her a name, did they? Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maidens walked along the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, the Yeled, and behold, the baby wept. From Hebrews Yeled, one of the Hebrews' children. Yeah, that's good. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women? Well, why didn't she get a nurse from all the other ladies? Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? The child, Ha-Yeled, the child for you? Well, look what Yasher says. And all the women of Egypt walking on the river's side desired to give him suck, but he would not suck, for this thing was from Yahovah in order to restore him to his mother's breast. And Miriam, his sister, was at that time amongst the Egyptian women on the river's side, and she saw this thing, and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and fetch a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the young women went and called the child's mother, her mother. also. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter's name is Bethiah. One of Bethiah's brothers is going to be the Pharaoh that Moses works with. You know what? Bethiah, one of Bethiah's brothers. One of Bethiah's brothers. Let's remember this. No, I guess he's going to work with Moses too. Moses is going to be involved with both pharaohs. In 94 years, Moses is going to be involved with both pharaohs. He has to be involved with both pharaohs. We'll see how this works out. It's pretty interesting. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. Well, these wages provided income for the house of Amram. His 135-year-old woman, 130-year-old, 131-year-old woman, was providing finances even to Amram's house. Part of the reason why he was able to survive when he wasn't working for the Egyptians as one of the Levites. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Well, that's 10. We have to stop now. That's as far as we get to go, because now we got to learn more. Here it is. It was at that time the spirit of Elohim was upon Miriam, the daughter of Amram, the sister of Aaron. And she went forth and prophesied about the house, saying, "Behold, a son will be born unto us from my father and my mother this time, and he shall save Israel from the hands of Egypt." Oh my goodness! How old is this daughter? She could potentially be 2, 3, 4 years old. Prophesying? Pretty amazing. And when Amram heard the words of his daughter, he went and took his woman back to his house, after he had driven her away at the time when Pharaoh ordered every male child of Jacob's house to be thrown into the water. He took her back. Where did she go? Where does a 131-year-old, 30-year-old woman go? Back to her father's house? He couldn't keep her in his house. Couldn't keep himself away from her. Wow. And Amram took Jochebed, his woman, 3 years after he had driven her away. And he came to her, and she conceived. So it could be that she had Miriam and Aaron, boom, boom, and then had 3 years. Remember, we were talking about the 125th year. There's 6 years that we have to deal with. And Moses could be, since he was a preemie, he could be conceived and born, of course, in the same year. It may work. It says, and Amram took Jochebed, his woman, 3 years after he had driven her away, and he came to her, and she conceived. Yeah, well, I had lots of thoughts about how old was Miriam. If she was 1 or 2 when she's prophesying, that would really be saying something, wouldn't it? Would that speak to people? Remember, we had, who was it? When Joseph, remember he was in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's son prophesied and gave a witness concerning Joseph, that his mother was at fault, and that his mother came on to Joseph, and really set things right. That spoke volumes to the people there, but Joseph still ended up being put in jail. I think politics more than anything. What if this little girl, Miriam, was prophesying when she was 1 or 2 and not 3 or 4? That could be interesting that he would bring her back. Well, there's so much that we can speculate on. We just don't have quite enough information to really see it all, do we? Okay, at the end of 7 months from her conception, she brought forth a son. Premature son. Think of it. The child that is going to save Israel is a preemie. He must have been so little. Perhaps that's why Pharaoh's daughter took pity on him. Perhaps. The servants of Elohim are also preemies. Boy, I cannot spell. The servants of Elohim are also preemies. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her sons. Ooh, I just think that's so interesting. At the end of 7 months from her conception, she brought forth a son. And the whole house was filled with a great light, as the light of the sun and the moon at the time of their shining. Isn't that interesting? Moses shined. And when the woman saw the child, the Yeled, that it was good and pleasing to the sight, she hid it for 3 months in the inner room. Why was she hiding it? In those days, the Egyptians, I'm glad you asked. In those days, the Egyptians conspired to destroy all the Hebrews there. And the Egyptian women went to Goshen, where Israel's seed were, and they carried their young ones upon their shoulders, their babies who could not yet speak. And in those days, when Israel's seed's women brought forth, each woman had hidden her son from before the Egyptians, that the Egyptians might not know that of their bringing forth, and might destroy them from the land. And the Egyptian women came to Goshen, and their children who could not speak were upon their shoulders. And when the Egyptian women came into the house of the Hebrew women, her baby began to cry. And when it cried, the Yeled that was in the inner room answered it. So the Egyptian women went and told the house of Pharaoh, man, don't let those ladies into your house. And Pharaoh sent his officers to take the Yeledim and slay them. Thus did the Egyptians to the Hebrew women all the days. And it was at that time, about 3 months from Jochebed's concealment of her son, that the thing was known to Pharaoh's house. There it is. This is why she had to get rid of her son, because the baby had been found out. Oh my gosh, I gotta do something, he's gonna die. So now she's gonna make the ark. And the woman hastened to take away her son before the officers came, and she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dubbed it with slime and pitch. I like what they said about the other one. Do you remember what it said? Something in pitch? Tar and pitch? Yeah, that makes more sense. Tar and pitch. Slime doesn't cut it for me. And put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister Miriam stood afar off to know what would be done to him and what would become of her words. Her words. What would become of her words? What are they talking about? They're talking about the prophecy that she had concerning this son being the Savior of Israel. The Savior of Israel. Yeah, it's the words of the prophecy. Deliverer. And Elohim sent forth at that time a terrible heat in the land of Egypt, which burned up the flesh of man like the sun in its circuit, and it greatly oppressed the Egyptians with extra information that we don't have. And all the Egyptians went down to bathe in the river on account of the consuming heat, which burned upon their flesh. And Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, they get a name. I like that she gets a name here. It just says the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, went also to bathe in the river, owing to the consuming heat. And her maidens walked at the riverside, and all Egypt's women as well. And Bathia lifted up her eyes to the river, and she saw the ark upon the water. And she sent her maids to fetch it. And she opened it and saw the child, the Yeled. And behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him. And she said, this is one of the Hebrews' Yeledim. And all Egypt's women walking by the riverside desired to give him suck. There, other people tried to do it, but it wouldn't work. But he would not suck, for this thing was from Yehovah, in order to restore him to his mother's breast. Oh, Yehovah has such a good plan. And Miriam, his sister, you know what? They wouldn't have figured out the plan, would they? No way would they have figured out that plan. We can't figure out what Yehovah is going to do for us, right? We can't figure it out. This is something that we have to wait and just see and work at and to do the best we can. She got rid of the child when there was nothing else left to do. It had to happen to keep the child alive. And Miriam, his sister, was at that time amongst Egyptian women at the riverside. And she saw this thing, and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and fetch a nurse from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, take this child away and suckle it for me, and I will pay thee thy wages, 2 bits of silver daily. And the woman took the child and nursed it. So look, there is Amram's house being provided for by Pharaoh. Oh my gosh! He's helping the house of the son who is going to deliver Israel from his own land. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. At the end of 2 years, when the child grew up, she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was unto her as a son. And she called his name Moses, for she said, because I drew him out of the waters. Well, now listen to this. This is a little bit monotonous in my mind. And Amram, his father, called him Kabar, for he said it was for him that he associated with his woman, whom he had turned away, brought her back. And Jochebed, his mother, called him Jekuthel, because she said, I have hoped for him to the Almighty, and Elohim restored him unto me. Miriam, his sister, called him Jared, for she descended after him to the river to know what his end would be. Aaron, his brother, called him Avi Zanuk, saying, my father left my mother and returned to her on his account. Kohath, the father of Amram, called him Avigdor, because on his account did Elohim repair the breach of Jacob's house, that they could no longer throw the male children, the Yeledim, into the river, the water. And now, did that happen? Did that happen after she picked up this child? Is it possible that she talked to her father and said, what are you doing, throwing the males into the water? I don't know. And their nurse called him Avi Soko, saying, in his tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months on account of Ham's seed. Their nurse?
Yeah.
Was the mother not the one who nursed him, perhaps? Isn't that weird? Yeah. Who's the nurse? Maybe it wasn't her that nursed her own son. Maybe she had a nurse come in to do it. You have to wonder. And all Israel called him Shemaiah, maybe, something like that, son of Nathanael. For they said, in his day has Elohim heard their cries and rescued them from their oppressors. Nathanael. And Moses was in Pharaoh's house, and was unto Bathia, Pharaoh's daughter, as a son. And Moses grew up among the king's sons. Wow, so much has happened. Now we're going to turn to Edom for a short time. And the king of Edom died in those days. In the 18th year of his reign, he was buried in the temple which he had built for himself as his royal residence in the land of Edom. And Esau's seed sent to Pethor, which is upon the river, and they fetched from there a young man sent to Pethor? And fetched from there a young man with beautiful eyes and comely aspects, whose name was Saul. And they made him king over them in the place of Samlah. Here it is in Genesis 36. And when Samlah died, Saul of, look what it says, of Rehoboth by the river, reigned in his place. I put perhaps Rehoboth is Rakab Rakabot by the river, Rakab. I think it might be. That's where he's from. But why does it say here that he's from Pethor? Here's where I thought it was, just for your information. I got to put it out on the map here today. Here's Rekab. Right here. It's near the river. But where is this other place? I don't know. So we've got two potential places that don't necessarily agree with one another here in this one. And Saul reigned over Esau's seed in the land of Edom for 40 years. And when Pharaoh, isn't it interesting that they keep going back to Esau so that we know what's happening in Edom? Why? Why does that keep happening? And when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, saw that the counsel which Balaam had advised respecting Israel's seed did not succeed, but that they still were fruitful and multiplied and increased throughout the land of Egypt, then Pharaoh commanded in those days that a proclamation should be issued throughout Egypt to Israel's seed, saying, no man shall diminish anything of his daily labor. And the man who shall be found deficient in his labor which he performs daily, whether in mortar or in brick, then his youngest son shall be put in their place. And the labor of Egypt strengthened upon Israel's seed in those days. In other words, they're asking them to do more. And behold, if one brick was deficient in any man's daily labor, the Egyptians took his youngest son by force from his mother and put him into the building in place of the brick, which his father had left wanting. And Egypt's men did so to all Israel's seed day by day, all the days for a long time. Remember, this is under that king Milau. But the tribe of Levi, Levi's tribe, did not at that time work for the Israelites, their brethren. From the beginning, for the Levi's seed knew the cunning of the Egyptians, which they exercised at first towards the Israelites. I'm going to continue for a little bit longer here. Moses was born in 130th year in Egypt. Now look what it says. This is Moses from year 3 to year 27. What was happening during those things? You know, we have these things that Moses was in Egypt for 40 years, and then he was in Midian for 40 years, and then he delivered the Hebrew children, and then they were in the wilderness for 40 years. That's what we've been taught. But that's not correct. There's far more going on, and Yasher makes it much more clear. When did Moses kill the man? Why did Moses kill that man? Oh my goodness. It was a righteous death, I think. Why did he kill that man? Why did he leave? And when did he leave? We're going to see that in this chapter. And the third year from the birth of Moses. Moses was born in the 130th year, so we're talking about 132 years in Egypt, probably. Was sitting at a banquet when Alparnaneth, the queen, was sitting at his right hand and Bathia at his left. And the lad Moses was laying on her bosom. And Balaam ben Beor with his sons, you hear that? Balaam ben Beor now has sons. And all the princes of the kingdom were sitting at the table in the king's presence. And the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head and took a crown from the king's head and placed it on his own head. Oh my goodness! And when the king and the princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and the princes were terrified. And one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. And the king said to the princes who were before him at the table, "What speak you, and what say you, O ye princes, in this matter? And what is to be the judgment against the boy on account of this act?" Well, the average person wouldn't think twice about this. But these guys, they're looking in the meaning of everything, it seems like. And Balaam ben Beor, the magician, answered before the king and the princes, and he said, "Remember now, my lord the king, the dream which thou didst dream many days since, 3 years ago, and that which thy servant interpreted unto thee. Now therefore this is a child of the Hebrew Yeladim, in whom is the spirit of Elohim. And let not my lord the king imagine that this youngster did this thing without knowledge. For he is a Hebrew boy, and wisdom and understanding are with him, although he is yet a child, a Yelad. And with wisdom has he done this, and chosen unto himself the kingdom of Egypt." Like he wants the kingdom of Egypt. "For this is the manner of all the Hebrews, to deceive kings and their nobles, to do all these things cunningly, in order to make the kings of the earth and their men tremble." It's a plot. "Surely thou knowest that Abraham their father acted thus, who deceived the army of Nimrod, king of Babel, and Avimelech, king of Gerar, and that he possessed himself the land of Hesed and all the kingdoms of Canaan. And he descended into Egypt, and said of Sarah his woman, She is my sister, in order to mislead Egypt and her king. His son Isaac also did so when he went to Gerar and dwelt there, and his strength prevailed over the army of Avimelech, king of the Philistines. He also thought of making a kingdom of the Philistines stumble in saying that Rebekah, his wife, was his sister. Oh, they're always doing this. Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brother and took from his hand his birthright and his blessing. He went then to Padamaran, to the house of Laban, his mother's brother, and cunningly obtained from him his daughters, his cattle, and all belonging to him, and fled away and returned to the land of Canaan to his father. You see how our actions get twisted to their own advantage. It always happens. You know, they see something in you and they want to say, well, he's doing this so that this is happening. And this is what the world does. This is what the world does. They don't know what's actually happening. His sons sold their brother Joseph, who went down to Egypt and became a slave and was placed in prison in the prison house for 12 years until the former Pharaoh. How does Balaam know all this? Until the former Pharaoh dreamed dreams and withdrew him from the prison house and magnified him above all the princes of Egypt on account of his interpreting his dreams to him. And when Elohim caused a famine through the land, he sent for and brought his father and his brothers and the whole of his father's household and supported them without price or reward and bought the Egyptians for slaves. Now therefore, my Lord, behold, this child, this Yeled, has risen up in their stead in Egypt to do according to their deeds and to trifle with every king, prince, and judge. Yes, that's exactly what's going to happen in the last days too. A male child is going to be born who's going to trifle with every king, prince, and judge on the earth. If it pleases the king, let us now spill his blood upon the ground, lest he grow up and take away the government from thy hand. And the hopes of Egypt perish after he shall have reigned. Well, Moses is never going to reign in Egypt. And Balaam said to the king, let us moreover call for all the judges of Egypt and the wise men thereof, and let us know if the judgment of death is due this boy, as thou didst say, and then we will slay him. Let's see if it's due this boy, and then we will slay him. It sounds like the judgment's already been made, doesn't it? And Pharaoh sent and called for all the wise men of Egypt. And they came before the king, and an angel of Yahovah came amongst them. And he was like one of the wise men of Egypt. Oh, I love seeing the hand of Elohim at work amongst his people. And the king said to the wise men, surely you have heard what this Hebrew boy who is in the house has done. And thus has Balaam judged in this manner. Now judge you also, and see what is due to this boy for the act that he has committed. And the angel, who seemed like one of the wise men of Pharaoh, answered and said as follows, before Egypt's wise men and before the king and the princess. He said, if it pleases the king, let the king send for men who shall bring before him an onyx stone and a coal of fire, and place them before the child. And if the child shall stretch forth his hand and take the onyx stone, then shall we know that with wisdom has the child done all that he has done, and we must slay him. But if he stretches forth his hand upon the coal, then thou shalt know that it was without knowledge and that he did this thing. That it was without knowledge that he did this thing, and he shall live. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes, so the king did according to the word of the messenger of Yehovah. And the king ordered the onyx stone and the coal to be brought and placed before Moses. And they placed the boy before them. And the lad endeavored, the Yeled before them, and the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone. But the angel, the messenger, Yahovah's messenger, took his hand and placed it upon the coal. And the coal became extinguished in his hand. And he lifted it up and put it to his mouth, and burned part of his lips and part of his tongue, and he became heavy of mouth and tongue. Ooh, do you hear what's happening? This incident did something to Moses' speech. It burned his lips and it burned his tongue. It says, and he became heavy in his mouth. Look what it says here in Exodus 4. Then Moses said to Yahovah, O Adonai, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Could this be why he was slow of speech and slow of tongue? He had a bit of a deformity. I think it might be. Just a thought. And when the king and the princes saw this, they knew that Moses had not acted with wisdom in taking off the crown from the king's head. So the king and the princes remained from slaying the Yeled. So Moses remained in Pharaoh's house growing up, and Jehovah was with him. And whilst the boy was in the king's house, he was robed in purple, and he grew amongst the king's seed. And Moses grew up in the king's house. Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, considered him as a son, and all the household of Pharaoh honored him. And all Egypt's men were afraid of him. Look at that. All Egypt's men were afraid of him. What was that all about? And he daily went forth and came into the land of Goshen, where his brethren, Israel's seed, were. And Moses saw them daily in shortness of breath and hard labor. And Moses asked them, saying, Wherefore is this labor meted out unto you day by day? And they told him all that had befallen them, and all the injunctions which Pharaoh had put upon them before his birth. And they told him the counsels which Balaam ben Beor had counseled against them, and what he had also counseled against him, Moses, in order to slay him when he had taken the king's crown off his head. And when Moses heard these things, his anger was kindled against Balaam, and he sought to kill him. And he was in ambush for him day by day. Hear that? Moses is looking to kill Balaam. And Balaam was afraid of Moses. And he and his 2 sons rose up, and he went from Egypt. And they fled and delivered their souls and betook themselves to the land of Cush. To the land of Cush. To Kikianus, king of Cush. Here is Balaam again, changing the places where he's going to reside. Things get hot, things get uncomfortable, he leaves, looks for better ground. Remember, Cush is the firstborn son of Ham. Here it is, Genesis 10:6. Ham's seed were Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, I guess that really doesn't matter. It was Cush. It was Cush that birthed Nimrod. Isn't that interesting? Was he a descendant of Nimrod? Kikianus? I don't know. And Moses was in the king's house, going out and coming in. And Jehovah gave him favor in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants, and in the eyes of all the people of Egypt. And they loved Moses exceedingly. Well, did they love him or did they fear him? They just said above, they feared Moses. They loved Moses exceedingly. And the day arrived when Moses went to Goshen to see his brethren, that he saw Israel's seed in their burden and hard labor, and Moses was grieved on their account. And Moses returned to Egypt and came to Pharaoh's house and came before the king. And Moses bowed down before the king. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, I pray thee, Adonai, my Lord, my master, I have come to seek a small request from thee. Turn not away my face empty. And Pharaoh said unto him, Speak. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, Let there be given unto thy servants Israel's seed who are in Goshen 1 day of rest therein from their labor. Oh, isn't that interesting? Moses helped them get the Sabbath going. And the king answered Moses and said, Behold, I have lifted up thy face in this thing to grant thy request. And Pharaoh ordered a proclamation to be issued throughout Egypt and Goshen, saying, To all Israel's seed, thus says the king, For 6 days you shall do your work and labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest, and you shall not perform any work. Thus you shall do all the days as the king and Moses ben Bathia have commanded. And Moses rejoiced at this thing which the king had granted to him. And all Israel's seed did as Moses ordered them. For this thing was from Jehovah to Israel's seed. For Jehovah had begun to remember Israel's seed to save them for the sake of their fathers, not for their sake. And Jehovah was with Moses, and his fame went throughout Egypt. And Moses became great in the eyes of the Egyptians and in the eyes of Israel's seed, seeking good for his people Israel and speaking words of peace regarding them to the king. Well, isn't this interesting? Now Moses' life is going to change forever. We're going to see it next week. What's going to happen to Moses? What's going to happen in Egypt? How old is he going to be? The first line says, and Moses was 18 years old when he desired to see his father and his mother. What's going to happen when he's 18 years old? Oh my goodness, we have so much to see. Well, please join me next week. We're going to continue our adventure. You know, this is stuff, you don't get to see this stuff in Torah. Man, you can't believe how much is left out. But when you see it, you begin to see how everything fits together. How come he can leave Egypt, be given to take Zipporah, and in 40 years he only has 2 sons? Does that make sense? Why is that? How come when he's going back, they're still not even circumcised? What's going on? How come this is taking so long? Our understandings don't fit. If we just think them out logically, they don't fit. But when we find out the rest of the story, we begin to see how it all fits together. Next week, we're going to see how it all fits together. Very interesting. Well, hey, thank you for joining me today. We'll catch you all next week. Bye now.